I'd like to join my colleagues, and we're all on the same committee. And there are two very simple things. The first thing, there's energy out there, and we're turning off the wind turbines. Plenty of energy, because we think there's nobody to use it. And there's people who need hot water, or maybe they could do other things with the energy in the evening. Let's use technology to people's benefit. The second one I don't understand is it'll take years to refurbish every local authority house. I can't understand in the interim why every local authority house aren't getting solar panels as a separate parallel scheme, because one does not interfere with the other. And we need to be just ruthlessly practical. And we have to stop people coming up with all sorts of reasons why not to do things. I think we in this country, we have to adopt the motto, do it. And if there are issues to be resolved, resolve them. Don't use them as barriers.
I agree with all three deputies. I think there's huge potential for us in the use of the smart metering system to improve energy savings, improve the use of our wind power particularly, and solar power. And I also would agree that the application or the widespread deployment of solar is going to be a major part, even in cloudy Ireland, of the energy future. So I absolutely agree that all three of those initiatives is something we should advance at full speed in every way we can. I think I'm glad the Deputy Knockton mentioned SAI and they have a role, but I also think the regulator has possibly the key role. And I think it has taken us time to get to the scale of smart metering we have now, but we're within sight to having universal access to smart metering. And that then makes it much easier for us to be able to deploy them in a way that's much more effective and to increase the use of them for variable charging and other mechanisms that will see their real benefit coming through. So I would be look forward to any recommendations from the committee in that regard. From my perspective, that's exactly the direction we need to go. It's the characteristics of this new energy system is a balancing system where we really ramp up demand when the volume of renewable power is there, and we manage efficiently when it's not. So on what all three deputies have said, I 100% agree.
agus inis ceistachtas a chathair in aim seachta Éamon Ó Cuív.
Minister, in terms of renewable, and leaving aside the historic hydroelectricity that we produce, in more recent years, most of the increase in energy has been in relation to onshore wind, and that's very, very good. But the question is, what increase have we got in relation to onshore wind, offshore wind, solar and other renewables in 2023? And the second part relates to what research is going on in relation to tidal energy and wave energy, because if they could be harnessed, they provide very, very interesting sources of energy with a higher reliability than, for example, onshore or offshore wind.
I think I'm glad to report to Deputy Cuív that last year was a very successful year for renewable electricity in Ireland. According to figures published by the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, renewable sources accounted for an average of some 46% of the electricity generated in Ireland last year, which was an increase of over 9% on the 2022 figure. Ireland now has over 6 gigawatts of renewable electricity generation capacity. Wind, particularly onshore, remains our largest source of renewable power and accounted for 39% of all electricity generated in 2023, with approximately 4.8 gigawatt hours of wind generation. Ireland is a world leader in levels of installed wind energy capacity per capita, as well as the integration of variable electricity onto the grid. Solar generation is also rapidly growing, with over 1 gigawatt of solar power now installed, which is a huge increase on the previous year, some 30-fold increase, I believe. Solar generation is highly complementary to wind generation, and increased solar capacity will help Ireland to generate clean electricity all year round. The SEAI provisionally estimate that electricity emissions in 2023 were some 23.5% lower than in 2022, and this figure has been finalised in the coming months by the EPA's greenhouse gas inventory. The upcoming offshore renewable electricity future framework policy statement will contain several actions on the potential for ocean technologies. The SEAI is developing an ORE technology roadmap to 2050, due for publication in the coming months, which will inform future directions for state research and policy on harnessing wave and tidal energy in Ireland.
Minister, you didn't give me the increase in 2023 in the amount of electricity being generated from onshore wind, offshore wind, solar and other renewables respectively. It's a very, very specific question, because the challenge is to have a year-on-year increase. Now, I think that you're going to tell me that's been a big increase in solar last year, and that's great news. I'm just wondering, can I get the figures? And it frustrates me when you put on a parliamentary question that's very specific, ask for data that must be available, and you don't get a specific answer in line with the data requested. So you might give me that data in relation to electricity increased generation from each of these sources.
Just to give some of those figures, wind, as I said, was 39.5% of our power. That was some 9%.
No, it's the increase.
9% year on year.
On wind, right?
Yes. Hydro, some 3%.
No, but what's the increase?
And a typical hydro year, because last year was very high water levels, would be typically something close to 2%. So there's something like a 50% increase in hydro because, as I said, the water volumes are very high. And in solar, 1.4%, which, as I said, is something like a 30-fold increase, 3,000% increase.
Well, can we get the exact figures?
I don't have the exact figure.
Well, can you get them to send me as the question was asked?
But those figures will bear out, I'm sure.
No, but I think the data I was looking for.
They are provisional, and it does require the EPA to do the final greenhouse gas inventories.
Look, I'm not going to argue about the final detail.
Right. Can I make the point that it was a very successful year? Partly because it was very windy, and because solar is now coming on stream, and this is only the first year it's coming on stream. Roughly 100 households a day are putting solar panels on the roof. We are putting them on every school. We had some 600 megawatts of solar in the field, some 400 megawatts on rooftop. And that's not stopping. If anything, it's accelerating and it's going to increase. We have 2 gigawatts of further solar in the field, which has already been through our auction process. So that number is going to jump. And we are going towards 80% renewables by the end of this decade. And the big question is, how do we tap into that ocean energy so we then turn it into an industrial opportunity? I'll have to be upfront and honest, I'm a great supporter of wave and tidal, but that's probably more medium term, long term. The immediate opportunity is in offshore wind, and there again we had a very successful auction system last year for some 3 gigawatts of offshore wind. We're going to go further south and west as we develop that resource.
Minister, I look forward to getting the detailed information as requested in the question. And I will allow and not come back on you if there's proved to be slight intolerances or tolerances required or inaccuracies in the reply. My question in relation to wave and tidal, my understanding was that the research on wave energy was ongoing. Now, about 10 years ago or more, they were doing wave bob tests in Galway Bay on wave energy. Your answer would seem to indicate that we're not even got that far. And I was wondering, are we going backwards in relation to wave energy? Because my understanding is that it's much more consistent. In other words, the waves die down slower than the wind can die down, and therefore it gives you more consistent power than wind energy will. I know that offshore is better than onshore because it's, again, a little bit more consistent. You have more wind offshore. But my understanding is that wave would be even better again to overcome the peaks and the troughs that are inevitable with renewable energy, the way we're using it. And of course, the creme de la creme, if you could harness it, would be tidal, because it's twice a day, totally predictable and absolutely guaranteed.
I remember that it was actually longer ago, it was about 14, 15 years ago, when the likes of Wave Bob and Open Hydro, really good Irish companies were, as you say, deploying in the seas, and that was something we massively supported in our last time in government, along with yourself and others. We are continuing that. SEAI are developing a marine energy test site out west of Belmullet, which will go out to the Atlantic to provide further testing facilities in a harsher environment than in Galway Bay. So we absolutely see that as future potential. But we have to be honest and upfront as well. Open Hydro is probably the best energy companies I've seen or dealt with, worked with. And unfortunately, the technology ran into difficulties, which requires further iterations, further improvements. Similarly with WaveBob, it's not that we're giving up on that, but that it is a harsh environment. It is difficult to generate electricity in a marine environment. And I absolutely commit to investing and supporting that. But the reality and truth is, in the immediate future, it is offshore wind which is going to provide the really large scale of volume where the technology has developed and evolved, and that too is part of our ocean marine research investment future.